Hello and welcome to another random chess puzzles video. These are rated about 1000 to 1500, so for beginner to intermediate players or anybody that just wants to brush up on their tactics. And remember, studying tactics, solving problems, tactics, puzzles is one of the best ways to improve your chess quickly, especially for beginners or intermediates, but also at any level. Regular tactical study definitely can make a difference. All right, so it's White's turn to move here. This pawn has just moved forward, attacking the knight here. So whenever you're trying to solve a tactical problem or in a game, it's always good to look at the checks first. Then look at the pieces to see if there are any unprotected pieces that can be attacked or unprotected pawns. So first the checks. We have, and at any time pause the video if you need to. So here we have a possible queen check. And then, that looks to be the move. I hope I didn't spoil it for you. So remember to just pause if you have to. All right, so queen to h5 check. The opponent can block with the pawn or the bishop. I guess the way to make it the most difficult for white would be block with the pawn, then the queen captures, block with the bishop, and then the queen captures. So here we go. Check, capture, and capture with mate. So remember, always look out for those checks against the king. That can make a big difference, or your own king. Don't forget to make sure that if you can't check or do a forcing move against your opponent right away, then you also have to watch out for forcing moves against your king, surprise checks that could lead to mate. All right, that was a 1450 rated problem. So on to the next one. We have knight to c3 attacking our queen. What can we do here? All right. Well, look for the checks. I mean, we could capture their queen with check, but then the knight would just capture. And that's pretty much forced. The only other check is to sacrifice the queen, but the king or the knight could capture. And I don't really see too much of a follow-up there. So, this one might be a little trickier. If we capture the queen, that's a forcing move. So forcing moves are good to take a look at when you're trying to study tactics and also in your normal games, because you would go ahead a queen, forcing this knight to recapture. And then perhaps there is a way to move this, unleashing an attack with the bishop on the knight. And if the knight moves, well, then we could pick off this right here and the rook would be trapped. So where would that knight move in the meantime? I don't see any, probably take this pawn. Anyway, that looks good, I think. So capture, discovered attack, and now we just get a knight for free here. All right, so that was 1110 rated. Hopefully you found that one. And one of the viewers said that they liked this 1000 to 1500 rated group of problems, that it was a good level for them. So feel free to leave comments at any time with what you think. If you need harder problems, I'm thinking about bumping it up to 1250 to 1750 maybe the next time. All right, let's see here. The queen has just moved. All right, so the queen has just moved there. what does that do? Creates a battery here, but the bishop is protected by this pawn. The queen is lining up on our bishop, which is protected. It's protecting here. If we capture, it's protecting the king side. So what checks do we have? We have the knight that can jump in here with the check. And that would be a forcing move once again. We could give up a knight because it's forking the king and the queen for the rook here, or this rook. So knight to e7, rook captures, and then we recapture, and we would get a rook for a knight. But first let's take a look at the material and see if it's even. So that makes a difference as well. We both have knight and bishop and 4 pawns. So everything's even. That looks to be the best move. Yeah, I would say that works. So check, and then we get the rook for the knight there. All right, well, hopefully you found that one, and remember to pause at any time if you need to. I'll try and do 10 problems, so I better speed this up a little bit. What happened here? Okay. The queen Okay, this is... I'm kind of wondering why the queen didn't just capture this bishop here. Okay, well... All right. Let's look for checks. So pause if you want to think longer, but I'm thinking, the queen could capture here with the check. And there's an interesting little pattern to remember. If a queen captures with check and is protected on a corner, so any of these white corners, if the queen can capture, then the queen will cover all of these squares on this side, all the squares on the bottom, and all the squares through this diagonal center. And the only two that it doesn't cover is G1 and H2. So if we do that, the king can only go to here. And then what? We're behind in material, so we have to go for a mate, I believe. We could just pick off this bishop, but then they'll pick off our bishop. So, but then we're attacking this rook as well. We could pick off that rook. Okay, I think we have to continue our attack though. So queen captures on f3. King has to move here to g1. Then our bishop could deliver a check here. And the only way to stop the mate is blocking with the bishop or the rook and then the bishop. Okay, I think that works. So capture. Oh, well. There could be a block with the bishop. Okay, that still works because now he has to give up the queen. So we get the queen with a check out of it and then this rook. So, all right, well, I hope you found that one. Let's move on to the next one. That was a 1340 problem. Okay, a pawn has been captured in front of our king. So if there's another recapture, there could be a discovered check by this rook. And our queen could be captured as well. So, what can we do in the meantime? Do we have any checking moves that can give us an advantage? Well, The only checks we have are rook checks, it looks like. So, oh, okay. Well, I think I found this one. Take a look. As always, pause if you need more time. But I think rook here to h8, forcing. So look for those forcing moves, especially if they're a check. You know, an attack against a king or a queen are pretty powerful. So rook to h8, forcing the king to capture. Then the queen can move over with check. The king will have to move, and then the queen can mate on h7. So here we go. And mate. All right, well, hopefully you found that one. We're halfway done. Let's try and knock out the other 5 for an even 10 today. Okay, a capture and an attack on our queen. We can't take this pawn because of the bishop and the queen covering it. You know, we could pick off this bishop. Then our queen would be captured and we could capture the rook. We could get rook and bishop for a queen, but that's still not, you know, that's the equivalent of 8 pawns versus 9, not the greatest trade. So, are there any possible checks? Well, looks like a queen check is the only possibility. So, rook to g5 check. And when the king is under check, there are 3 possibilities to stop the check. Run with the king, block. You could block with the queen, or capture. And we can't capture the queen here. So even if they check, we could capture the queen, trade them off, and then grab this bishop here. So I think that might work. But looks like we could grab this bishop. So check, and then we might as well just get rid of the queens and trade down material because we're about to go up here. And remember, to trade off, you can get an advantage in the end game if you go ahead in material to trade off the rest of the pieces. You know, if you're behind in material, remember to try and trade pawns off. Okay. And why does that make a difference? Well, let's say you're behind by a bishop and you trade off all the pieces and there's no pawns left and your opponent just has a bishop. Well, bishop and king can't mate, of course, against a lone king. But if there are pawns left on the board, there's a possibility of those promoting. So you should get rid of those pawns if you're behind. All right. The rook is just moved here behind the not a passed pawn, but behind a pawn. So that's usually a good place for a rook to be, behind its own pawns or the opponent's pawns. Now we could just move our bishop here and protect this pawn. But do we have something better? I think so. I think we have the possibility of a checkmate here. All right, so, you know, if we check with our rook, look for the checks, the king can just escape. So, you know, we could cut the king's escape off with the bishop and then deliver the mate. The rook will have to block, but there's still a mate there. All right, I hope you got that one. 1290 rated. Let's move on to the next one. Oh, we have a check here. Black has 2 pawns for the knight, but we're in check, so we have to do something about that. A good move might be blocking with our knight and checking at the same time. I apologize if I gave up that move. Remember to just pause if you think you're going to need more time. Okay, so if we block, we're checking at the same time, and the king can only go here, and we could mate with the queen, or if the king moves up and we check with the queen, the only place the king can go then is here, And that would lead to a mate as well. All right. So here we go. And now we just deliver a mate. So another pattern to remember. I talked about the squares around the king, and if the queen is protected and able to check on one of the corner squares, then whatever corner it's in, the only two squares the king cannot go to are on the opposite side of that corner, and they're the opposite colored squares. So if the queen was here on h5, then the king could go to g7 or f6, but the queen covers everything else. So if you can cover those two squares and check with the queen and be protected, then it can lead to mate. Now this is another pattern where the queen is hitting one of the squares in the middle of one of the sides instead of the corner. So here the queen covers everything through the center and all of these squares, and the only two that it doesn't cover are the corners on the opposite side. So these are interesting patterns to remember, and that could maybe help you when you're trying to checkmate somebody. All right, let's finish up here the last two problems. We have a queen centralizing with a check. Okay, material. We have 2, 4, 5 pawns versus 5, rook and queen. So material is even. We are threatening to mate here. So we have a mate threat. Okay, mate threat. But we're in check, so we have to deal with that. You know, if we block, the queens would just be traded. You know, that doesn't look like anything great. So, you know, I'm thinking we just block with the pawn. That stops any checks for a while. Then we're threatening to mate here on g5, and the only way to stop that is to push this pawn forward. Then we have a check here. The queen will be forced to capture this pawn, and then we could check. Maybe we got to check this way, or no, even better would be to check this way. Then the king, that would be mate, I believe. And, okay, let's double check. So it's also good to calculate in your head instead of playing one move at a time, kind of cheating. So let's check everything out. We have check on f3 with the queen. The only moves... Oh, well, the king could escape up this way. Oh, well, first of all, we have to block. So first we have to block. Then we're threatening a mate here. So this pawn has to move forward to h6. Then we can't mate here anymore. We check on f3 with our queen. The queen will have to move forward, and then we can check here. And that's a mate, I believe. No, he can jump back to here, and then the rook will mate in the end. Okay, so here we go. Oh, another. Okay, I wasn't expecting this move, so you know that's something to take a look at. And that's one of my weaknesses is calculation. You know, I'm not the fastest calculator, and that can, you know, I'd probably be a higher rated player if I didn't have that deficiency. So, you know, if I could calculate faster, I could calculate more variations. So, rook blocks, you know, and then we're still threatening a mate here. And we're threatening to just capture the queen. So, yeah, now we just get a queen for free. So, I guess he didn't want to go into that mate there, of course. All right, so here we go. The final problem. We just had a capture. So first, as usual, you want to look for checks against the enemy king. and if there's a follow-up to those checks. Don't just check because it's a check. So queen to f4. Now if the king goes here to h3, we could check, king will run, and then we mate. So if the king runs up to here, we can check, king goes here, check, he runs here, and then we mate. What are the other options? So queen to f4 check. If the king runs up here, we check again. That's pretty much forcing. So here we go. Check, 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 and mate. All right. Well, I hope you did well on those problems. As always, feel free to leave any comments. Let me know if you want more difficult puzzles or if these are fine. We had one viewer that definitely liked this level of puzzles and explanation. So leave comments, like and subscribe to support the channel if you haven't already. Thank you for watching and have a super chess day.